In the name of the Father, and the Son, and of the Holy Ghost, amen. Come, Holy Ghost, for the hearts of thy faithful, and enkindle them with the fire of thy divine love. Send forth thy Spirit, and our hearts shall be created. Let us pray, O God, to disinstruct the hearts of thy faithful by the light of the Holy Ghost. Grant the gifts of the same Spirit. We may be always truly wise and ever rejoice in his consolation through Christ our Lord. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. St. Pius X. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and of the Holy Ghost. Amen. All right, so welcome back. We've got a full schedule tonight, but I think we can manage it. We've been looking at the active purification, the active mortification of ourselves, and we've already looked at the mortification of the body, as well as the mortification of the internal senses, especially the imagination and the memory. And those are going to be important because if we don't control our imagination, well, yes, we might be fasting, but we can lose control of the inside and then we start sinning from there, right? So the imagination we have to control. We don't kill it, but we control it. And the memory as well, particularly, although I didn't mention it last time, particularly as regards past injuries. If we have been hurt by someone in the past and we allow that to come back to our memory again and again, it's just going to keep feeding the same old problem. We have to forget about that as far as we can. We have to move forward. We have to embrace the cross, offer it to God, and move forward. It may come up. We may not always be able to control the fact that it resurfaces here and there, but we can decide whether we focus on it. All right, so the mortification there of the memory is going to be a great help to the salvation of our soul, the purification of our soul. Tonight we want to look at the mortification of our passions, and then the mortification of our intellect, and the mortification of our will. So you have a handout there, which we're going to look at in a moment. I apologize if there are any typos or things there. It's once again, it's a first draft of that chart. So finished hot off the press just this evening. But it's really based on Tanquerey's The Spiritual Life. All right, so before we get into that chart and into that handout as such, all right, what are the passions? If we're going to mortify them, if we're going to control them, discipline them, what are they? Well, we can give a definition. They are vehement movements of the sensitive appetite towards sensible good, reacting more or less strongly on the bodily organism. Right, so once again, vehement movements of the sensitive appetite. So we've got the rational appetite, that we call the will. We're going to talk about that later. But we've got the sensitive appetite. Our senses long for their object. And we like to taste things that please the tongue. We like to see something beautiful. All right, so there's an appetite of the sense. There's a sense appetite, not just a rational appetite, the will, but sense appetites. Well, these are vehement movements of the sensitive appetite. So our senses are open, they perceive something, they receive an impression from something, and then there's a vehement movement that corresponds. Those are the passions. Those are and obviously they can easily get out of control. They can spin us out of control. They can turn us, because anything we can sense is going to be a creature, unless you can see Jesus Christ in the flesh, right? Anything you sense is a creature. If there's a vehement reaction towards it or away from it, well, that's the way we're made. But if we don't control that, it's already vehement. If we don't control that, we're going to be attached to creatures too much or afraid of other creatures too much. Either one will throw us off balance. So this vehement movement of the sensitive appetite towards a sensible good, reacting more or less strongly on the bodily organism. Right? More or less strongly on the bodily organism, meaning we are body and soul. What we perceive affects us. We're not talking just a simple little sentiment. where there might be a little bit of an attraction no, we're talking properly speaking, a passion for something. All right, well, that's going to impact us. When we get angry, for example, it's a passion. And it causes the blood to rush to the brain. And it puts a strain on the nerves. It's a physical reaction. You can see someone when they're really angry. Depends on the person, but most people, when they get really angry, you can't see their heart beating faster, but you see their face turn red. Right? They see red, they look red, they're angry inside. It's actually something that happened outside of them is moving them. That's the difference. A passion, we often think, a passion is something that I'm doing. A passion is something that's happening to us. You've got action, that's something you do. You've got passion, that's something you receive. We are sparked by something that goes on outside of us, something that's perceived by our senses, and now we've got to cope with that. Those are the passions. Right? They're prompted by something else. It might be a memory of something, but it's something else we perceived at one point or another. I'm still angry about such and such. All right, so the memory is recalling something of the past as if it were present now. Something that you perceived with your senses in the past is being made re-present, represented by the memory. Right, so anger causes blood to rush to the brain. Fear causes one to turn pale. Love dilates the heart. And fear contracts the heart. These are all passions, and they impact us physically. They impact the physical organism of man. So we have to learn how to respond to them. Are they sins? Are they not? Are they useful? Are they not? God wouldn't give them to us if they weren't useful. At the same time, we have a wounded nature, so they're often prone to get out of control. They're certainly not the highest part of man. We are not Stoics, where we just try to kill the passions, where there's nothing there. Everything's monotone. Life in black and white. No, we're not, that's not us. We're also not the Epicureans, where the passions are, in a certain sense, glorified, deified. If I feel this strongly, it must be right. No. If I want this that bad, if I long for this much, it must be good for me. It's not true. It's not true. The passions are not the supreme. They're not the final word. They're meant to be subject to the will, and the will to the intellect. So the passions have their place. It's much easier to get something done when we're passionate about it. It's much easier to do something difficult for, let's say, a mother in the middle of the night taking care of a sick child. It's much easier for her to do that for her sick child than for someone else's sick child, because she loves her child in a different way. And that's a beautiful thing. It helps us, it can help us do our job and carry through. The passions can also blind us. And the passions of themselves, they're sensitive appetites, but they have no perception. Let's say they have no, they're blind. They're a reaction in the body. The passions are blind. If we follow our passions, we are going blindly in the dark. It's the intellect that sees. It's the intellect that informs the will as to what to do. The passions receive simply a stimulant from the outside through the senses, but the senses can't judge whether something's good or bad. It can judge whether something's hot or cold. Our senses can judge whether something's beautiful or not, to a certain point, attractive or not, but they can't tell you whether it's good or bad. That's the intellect. So the passions have to be kept in the proper place. I think this is where really it's lack of mortification of our passions. Oh, it's my temperament. Oh, it's my personality. It's lack of mortification of our passions that gets us into worlds of trouble. Whereas if we can get this right, it's not the only thing, but it will really help us move forward. Obviously, some people are more passionate by nature than others. Fine. That may be a help, that may be a hindrance. It may be a help in certain circumstances and a hindrance in others. You do get some people that are just, some nationalities are really prone to be hot-headed. Other nationalities are really prone to, they're the lovers of the world or whatever. There's just something there. It doesn't mean that they have to follow it, but that's the way that the tree is leaning. So they might have to counterbalance, in fact, a bit. All right, so how many passions are there? Well, there's different breakdowns, but the scholastic breakdown lists 11 passions. You might say, wow, so we've got to go through all 11 passions, figure out how to mortify them. In one sense, it's very, you can spend a lot of time on it. In one sense, it's fascinating, and you go in depth in each one of the passions. In another sense, it's very simple. The passions, when they're getting out of control, it's because they're in contact, they're being stimulated by something outside of you, or something that you've allowed to come back into your memory as if it was still there. What do you do if your soup is boiling over? You turn it off, or even better, you take it off and then turn it off, and then when it's cooled, when that surface is cooled down, you can put it back on, get it to where you can keep it warm but not boil over. The fastest way to get the stew to stop boiling over is to get it off the source of the flame, to get it away from that, so that you can get a control over the situation. And then then you can turn it totally off, or you can damper the flame, whatever it is. So with the passions, whichever one of these 11 passions we're talking about, if it's getting out of control, take it out of contact with what's stimulating it, and you've already won half the battle. Someone who is angry, well, the last thing he can afford to do is start joining with other people who are angry about the same thing, and increase the trouble. All right, the last thing he can afford to do is to stay near the one who's making him angry. No, he needs to step back. Somehow he has to disengage as far as he can. Similarly, when it comes to something like lust. All right, so love gone wrong, if you want. All right, love here obviously doesn't mean some sort of a selfless, sacrificial love of the will. No, that's a higher thing. But love in the sense of my passion goes towards what it likes. Well, if there's a problem with that getting too hot, getting too passionate, then turn your eyes away, change company, go do something, get your mind on something else, take the pot off the flame, and things will calm down, and it'll be easier then to be able to think through, all right, what do I need to do here? What's the situation? How do I need to react to this? Now, of course, there's different types of passion. So go ahead and look at your handout. I hope it's fairly clear. All right, we have the first column on the left-hand side. All right, we sense and then we respond. So that's what we've been talking about already. First, we sense something, and then there's a response. Now, sometimes it's going to be described under the passion that it makes us do this or it makes us do that. Well, it doesn't mean that it takes away our free will, but that's the inclination. That's the push. Right away, it's a push towards this or towards that. All right, so we have two different types of appetites, sense appetites. We have the concupiscible appetite, also known as the pleasure passions, and we have the irascible appetite, also known as the aggressive passions. All right, so that's the first breakdown. You've got certain things that we simply apprehend as good, and the passion towards that is love. That's the name we give to that passion. I apprehend something good, all right? We're talking something desirable, and love is our reaction. Love is the master passion. All the other passions only make sense if we understand that they come from love. It's because we are made, the appetites are made for something that feels good, looks good, is good, right? They're made for something that pleases. So, although we have to control that, that's what they're longing for. Love is that passion. If we hate something, it's because it's opposed to what we love. If we're afraid of something, it's because we risk losing what we love. If we're rejoicing over something, it's because we possess what we love. And on and on. All of the passions depend on what we love. That's why St. Peter Julian Amart says, we live as we love. You want to live the right way, you want to have the right kinds of passions. First thing is love the right things. Love the right things, and it will help to keep everything in order. Love the wrong things, and this is all going to go haywire. So, when we simply apprehend something that is good, the reaction is love. And when there's an evil opposed to the good that we love, there's hatred. When the good that we love is something we're wanting, we're hoping for in the future, we call that desire. We desire it. We don't have it yet, but we want it. If on the contrary, if it's something, there's an evil, the opposite of good, there's an evil that we want to avoid, all right, then it's aversion. We steer clear of it. We see something or someone we don't want to talk to, and we just make we give them wide berth. Aversion or flight. When the good is present, the good that we love, that there's joy. When there's an evil that's present, then there's sadness. Can sadness be a sin? Well, sadness is a passion. Let it get out of control, it can lead you to sin for sure. Someone who stops saying their prayers, stops going to Mass on Sunday because they're so weighed down with sadness. They've allowed their sadness to get totally out of control. Yes, it can lead to sin. We can have compassion that they're suffering. And there may be more going on. There may be some psychological thing they need help for. I don't know. But yes, these things can impact us and lead towards sin. That's why we're trying to mortify them. And then, of course, there's the irascible appetite. These are the aggressive passions. When there's a difficult evil that's absent but conquerable. I could conquer it. That's courage. It's a difficult evil. It's not just your average challenge. It's a difficult evil. And so it takes daring. It takes courage to approach it, to try to conquer this problem. To a difficult evil absent but seemingly unconquerable. Then there's fear. Right? It's not here. It's coming. I don't know how I'm going to face this. How many people live in fear all the time? Fear, how many times does that lead to sin? My fear. Well, fear of what? Fear of what other people are going to think about me. Fear of the challenge that it's going to take. Fear of the effort that I'm going to have to make. Fear of the penance that I'm going to have to do. Fear of the humiliation of confessing the sin in the confessional, or whatever. Fear can lead to all sorts of problems. If we let our life be run by fear, there's going to be we're always going to be running from something rather than choosing something. And people are different. Some people really struggle with fear. Other people really struggle with sadness. We've got to know where our challenges are. And then, of course, hope. It's when there's a difficult good that's absent, but it's possible to obtain it. Well, we hope, and we hope, and we hope for it. It's more than just desiring. It's a difficult good, so it's a hope. It's another level. To a difficult good that's absent and seemingly impossible to attain, that's where the passion of despair starts to come in. It's sadness to the extreme because this looks so impossible to achieve. And then anger. It's a response. It's kind of like the extreme version of, you could say, aversion. To a difficult evil actually present. There's something really present, or something that's really problematic, and it's difficult. Well, anger, it's not just a little impatience, it's anger. It rouses us. Now you've got the different descriptions there. I'll leave you to look at those on your own. But each one of the passions is described, right? Just like, we'll start with just love. We'll just read that one. A yearning for union with a person or thing that pleases us. We crave to possess it. That's the passion of love. It's a yearning, even if it's just a chocolate cake. I yearn to be united with that go right into me. All right? That's it's love at a very base level. But you look at a child, when he likes something, he goes and he takes it, and then he puts it in his mouth and he gets all his senses on it, right? So and you can tell, he really loves that blanket. Yeah, because he goes everywhere with it. He has it in his ear, he has it up his nose, he has it everywhere because he loves that blanket, right? It's a very basic type of love, but it's an attraction. The passion is starting to move, to be attracted to certain things. Now, what are some of the effects of poorly ordered passions? Rather than going through each one of them individually, which we could touch on to a certain point, we'll give some examples. But let's look at the dangers of poorly ordered passions in general. Because any one of these gets out of control, and it's going to basically do these things to us. It's going to impact us these ways. Firstly, the passions, when they're ill-ordered, when they're poorly ordered, they produce blindness in the soul. Because heedless of reason, they move headlong towards their object, led by an attraction or by a pleasure. Think of, for example, someone who has given way to the passion when it comes to romance. Are they thinking about what they're doing? Not really. They've hit a boiling point. They're doing things that they never wanted to do. They're sacrificing virtue in ways that they told themselves and others they would never do. Why? Because they're blind. They've let the passion get out of control, and now they can't see clearly anymore. Oh, then they're not guilty, right? Because they can't see clearly anymore. No. They had a duty to keep themselves from the boiling point. They're not allowed just to let the pot boil over. They had a duty to keep an eye on it, and if things were getting too hot, to step away. That's the way it is. So the passions, when they're out of control, they blind us. And it's not just lust. Think of anger. When someone sees red, they say things, they do things that sometimes they can't even remember afterwards. I said that? I did that? And they just fly off the handle and do things that they're precisely not thinking about. Oh, but then they're not guilty. Yes, they are guilty. They don't have a right. We don't have a right just to abandon ourselves to our lower nature, to our passions. We are guilty. These things imbalance our judgment. They cloud right reason. The sensitive appetite is by nature blind, and the soul becomes blind too, should it allow itself to be guided by it. It's similarly with, you can go through any one of them. Fear can blind. Or you're suddenly finding yourself doing things that, why am I doing this? What? Because I'm afraid of the consequence. My other option is this. Well, stop and look at that. Is this really what God is asking of you? Think of sadness or despair. Someone who's deeply sad, who especially if there's a level of despair, they're not seeing clearly anymore. The whole world is dark. All right, so the passions, when they're ill-ordered, they blind us. It's funny because it's our senses that see, in some way, perceive, bring data in, and then when the passion gets going hot enough, we're not blind with these eyes, we're blind with the eyes inside. It is striking. Let the animal take over, and the man side just shuts down in a certain way. The human, what's properly human, the higher part of man. All right, the passions, when they're ill-ordered, they weary and torture the soul. I think it's St. John of the Cross says, he compares them to impatient little children that are never pleased or satisfied. They continually go back to their mother and I want this, I want that, I want this, and it wears mom out. Never satisfied. Well, also, it would wear us out. And it's a torture because there becomes this battle between our cravings, our animal cravings, and our conscience, which says, no, this is right and this is wrong. And this battle it's a hard thing when your conscience keeps saying, you can't do that, but I want it. I want it. No, you can't do that, but I want it. Think of the battles at home sometimes when there's an unruly teenager or something. It's exhausting on both sides because there's this battle of wills. But here it's passion versus will, versus truth as well, intellect. It also weakens the will. So not only does it torture and weary the soul as a whole, but it weakens the will in particular, which is forced to scatter its strength in every direction, and by so doing, it lessens its strength. One moment it's trying to get love in order. The next moment it's trying to overcome a certain jealousy and hatred towards someone. The next moment it's trying to avoid this problem, and then it's rejoicing intensely here, and then you're exhausted after a while. If the passions are out of control, the will, sooner or later, it just feels too tired to continue. And then, of course, the dangers are very great. When the will says, like the parent says to the child, just do what you want. I'm tired. Do what you're on your own. Good luck. Good luck. And the kids are just waiting for that. I remember one little boy in Phoenix, Arizona. We had a men's working bee at the parish, and his dad was in charge of painting or something. All the paint was in the back of the ute. And the little boy, about 3 years old, he was in the back of the ute too, and he looked at his dad and he said, "Dad, when you're done with what you're doing, can you go far away from here?" And the dad said, "Why do you want me to go far away from here?" "I'm not going to get in the paint, Dad. I'm not going to get in the paint." Yeah, right. That's exactly what he was going to do. All right, but that's it. Our passions are like that. They're looking for an opening. Just give me a little free time. I'll be fine. Just cut me a little slack. Come on, don't you trust me? No, I don't, actually. No, I don't trust the passions just to be unsupervised. They're blind. All right. They weaken the will. They blemish the soul. For by yielding to passions, the soul joins herself to creatures, and lowers herself to their level. This is St. John of the Cross. All right, listen closely. Each one of us should be looking inside, not looking at someone else going, "Oh, I know what their passion is. I know what their problem is. I know what their predominant, tendency is." No, we should be looking inside at ourselves and saying, "Where's my problem?" Because if there's even one disordered passion in us that we're not working on, we're not going to make progress as we should. And think about it. Most of us, we feel justified when we're passionate. Well, it's understandable because, at the moment, Father, it was just, things were out of control. I had to step in. I had to lose my temper. I had to use that language. I had to, we had every right to be whatever, grumbling and griping as a group about this or that person and feeding each other's anger. We had every right for that because something had to be done. What do? Most of the time, where we have a problem, we justify it. And it could be anger, it can be sadness, it can be lust, it can be whatever one of these it is for us, we tend to feel fairly justified. Well, under the circumstances, who could blame me? And in fact, maybe even it was virtuous. I know I reacted that way, and I know it probably looked a little out of place, but if you understood all the circumstances, you would see that actually I was the hero. I was the hero of that moment. What does St. John of the Cross say? Quote, "I do not hesitate to affirm that one single disordered passion, even if it lead not to mortal sin, is enough to cause the soul such a state of darkness, ugliness, and uncleanness that it becomes incapable of intimate union with God so long as it remains a slave to this passion." One of them. Even if it doesn't lead us as far as mortal sin, but we're not working on it, one of them will hold us back. He says it doesn't matter, with the example he always gives, it doesn't matter what holds us down. It could be something small, it could be something big. If it holds us down, it holds us down. He says, look at a bird. You can tie a little tiny thread to its leg and tie that to the ground, to the foot of a stool or something. Or you could put a big old chain on there. In either case, the bird can't fly. whether it's a light thing or a huge thing, the bird can't fly. Similarly with this, if we're not working on our passions, if we're not mortifying them, we cannot move forward the way we're meant to. Now, I'm not saying we don't make any progress until we're perfect. No, that doesn't work that way. But we've got to be working on our passions. Now, what are some of the ways that we can master our passions? That's the last column. And again, we could go further. In Tanquerey, there are pages and pages on the passions, and he talks about each one of them and breaks down. Here are some things that you could take a passion that's being used badly. You can take that and turn that fire towards a good cause. And here's a good cause you could fight for example. Here's the type of you're prone towards anger. Well, here's the type of thing that you could be angry about. Here you're prone towards sadness. Well, here's the type of sadness that could be fruitful, like compunction for your sins and sorrow that the world is offending God. Here are things you can do with those passions, but take them off their improper object. So you can look at Tanquerey for that. We're looking at more because we can only do so much in a night. Let's look at in general, what we can do to attain a mastery over the passions. One, he says, the first thing you have to do is count on the grace of God. Don't try to just do this alone. Count on the grace of God, and therefore on prayer and the sacraments. Going to confession, receiving Holy Communion with the intention, please help me become more this, more that, less this, less that, whatever the problem is. Whether we sin by excess or by defect, whether we're too passionate or we're too afraid, well, we can ask through confession and communion, and of course through prayer. So count on God's grace, prayer and the sacraments, all throughout this whole section, all throughout the purgative way. What are we saying? How do we purify our souls? What can we do? Because there's active purification. What can we do? We can pray and we can do penance. Or we can pray, we can sacrifice. Penance and mortification both go there. Does that sound familiar? That's Fatima. That's revelation after revelation. Our Lady keeps saying, if you want to be saved, pray and do penance. Pray the rosary and do penance, or pray and do penance. It's not that hard. She's saying most people in the world, well, everyone starts in the purgative way. Everyone's going to have to start here. So let's, like we're doing in this class, let's start there. Pray and do penance, because holiness will come. So the first thing is, yes, pray. Don't try to just do penance or mortification. Pray. Secondly, apply sound, natural, and supernatural tactics. Don't just haphazardly kind of jump in. We don't have to have a textbook for everything. I think if we gave scenarios, most people would be able to figure out some sort of an answer for other people. It's a little harder to see it for ourselves, but we'd probably be able to find an answer for the other people. So if you've got all the angry people with all the lustful people, with all the sad people, they'd probably be able to figure out each other what the other person should do. And they might even know it for ourselves a little bit. Right? But apply sound tactics. The natural tactics, because grace builds on nature, the natural tactics, and the supernatural tactics. So some of these you're going to look and say, oh, even a therapist might tell me that. Yeah, you're right. Because if they're a therapist worth anything, they just simply recognize the natural side of things. The scientists will tell you things too that you'll find, you'll stumble across in the Bible or something. Why? Or the historian. Because there's not a contradiction between the two. God made the world. And so whether the scientist is telling you about it or we find it in divine revelation, it's the same God that made the world and that made the laws of nature. Don't be surprised that we find his footprint all over the place. All right, so what are some of these tactics? Avoid exterior actions that would stimulate or intensify the passion. If the passion is getting out of control, don't do anything that's going to encourage it to continue to get out of control. You're angry at someone. Don't just sit there and glare at them and look at all, this is what I hate about them. This is, look at the guy. Can anyone like him? I mean, you don't just stay there, and you certainly don't start doing gestures and things that are going to stir the problem, both within you and within him. All right? So, it's like you're driving down the road and there's somebody who's, there's a bad driver that's been causing trouble on the road next to you. Well, don't chase him down. And stay right with him. And every time he changes lane, you change lanes too. And, he's not getting away from me. Oh, yeah, that's a great idea. Avoid exterior actions that would stimulate or intensify the passion. That's anger, but you could apply it to lust or other things. Next, if it's a pleasure passion, strive to forget about the object desired. So, you really want this. You really, it could be love in a broad sense. It could be love of, you really want this T-bone steak on Good Friday, right? But you really want it. Try to stop thinking about it. First, certainly don't go sit down right in front of it and just, smell it. I'm just going to get close. It's not forbidden to look. I hate that when people say, you can look but don't touch. No, get away from it. We don't put ourselves right next to whatever the occasion of sin is. If it's a pleasure passion, strive to forget about the object, try to put some distance. It's just common sense. Take the pot off the boil. If it's an aggressive passion, strive through instant flight to allow the passion time to cool. You notice in both cases, it's kind of a flight. That's why I think proud people have a hard time controlling their passions. Because you don't conquer them by being macho. You conquer them by getting away from them. And that feels like a failure for some people. I'm fleeing from temptation. I should just face it. And then I'll conquer it. When I was in Fiji at one point, I was talking with a young man. I said, you drink a lot of kava? Yeah, I knew from his father that he did. Kava just kind of makes you groggy. They call it grog for a reason. It just makes you groggy the next day. It's hard. It doesn't make you drunk, really, but it makes it hard. It numbs your joints and it makes it harder to get up the next morning. Well, it seemed like he was struggling a bit to do his duties. So you drink a lot of grog? Yeah. Maybe you want to cut back on that so you can get to work. No, Father. The best thing is to conquer yourself. Drink a lot of grog and still get up in the morning. No, I think you should probably just cut it in half. Cut the grog in half. That's just the way it goes. The passions, I'm not saying that they're all bad, but we don't play their game with them. We don't, just like a child that's unruly, you don't meet them halfway. When it's something that's wrong or bad for them, you just say no. No, I won't give you that, but I'll give you $5 instead. I'm not going to bribe you to do the right thing. If I say no because it's not good for you, then I say no. And then if later there's something else that is good for you that you want, well, that's a different story. Right? But we don't bribe the passions. They're ready to get out of control. They'll take anything they can get and they'll keep asking. They don't calm down. Right? Like a child, the more you spoil them, the harder it is to please them. Same with the passions. So, instant flight. Allow the passion time to cool. Now, you might not always be able to leave the situation outright. There may be a situation at work where you can't actually just walk away. You're on the clock. But you can emotionally step back. You can get your mind and your heart, you can lift it to something else. You can, we don't have to, allow our frustration to become a fever. Oh, well, if I had my way, I'd say this, and I'd say that, and I'd say this, and I'd say, and all afternoon we brood on it and wonder why we're still angry. If you do actually have to have that conversation, wouldn't it be better to think about something else for the next hour, calm down, make a sacrifice, ask for the grace to speak rationally when the time actually comes? Solving our problems by brute force doesn't make us more a man, it makes us more a brute. That's how animals do it. They fight it out. That's how two, male deer in the woods sort it out. That's not how men do it. We're rational beings. We sort things out with our reason. Even if there's a time where we might have to defend ourselves because we're under present attack or because there's a just war we have to fight, fine. But we do it calmly because we know that that's what has to be done. Not because we've lost our cool. Now, make positive acts directly opposed to the harassing appetite. That's one that's, all right, it's like throwing an ice cube into the fluid that's overheating. Well, yeah, go against it. Get it away. It's too hot, get it away. It's too cold, put it back on the flame. You've got to do the opposite. It's like correcting a car. You're going to, you're sliding off the road this way. Well, don't swing the wheel that way. I mean, if you're on ice or something, you can talk about the physics of it, that's fine. But if it's just, I'm going too far one direction, I'm leaning too far off this cliff, well, don't lean further that way. You've got to go the opposite way. It's just common sense. So make positive acts directly opposed to the harassing appetite. So, for example, I can't stand this person. Try to befriend them then. I don't know what it is, I just don't like being around them. Try to look for what's good in them. Little by little, try to show little acts of kindness. Pray for them. Look inside, see what it is that might be, in you that's rubbing. Don't just feel justified and therefore I'm not going to look at it anymore. No. Agere contra. Go against the passion when it's getting out of control. And then feed the mind. Feed the mind. Because remember, this tries to blind us. Well, the mind will enlighten. Feed the mind since every idea tends to evoke a corresponding act. We must be careful to shut out all the bad ideas, the disordered sensual desires, and replace them with some nobler thought and emotion. If you're being tempted towards fear, well, maybe it's time to start thinking about courageous men and what they did and how they overcame it. Look at the noble things they did and try to stir up the proper emotion for heroism. Good thoughts reach their maximum strength when they are habitual and absorbing. So when we come back to it again and again, it could be something, life is short, eternity is long. It doesn't matter what others think, as long as God is pleased. Come up with whatever, or for me to live is Christ and to die is gain. Choose a maxim that somehow summarizes the values you have and make it habitual. When you come into difficulties in that area, you know what to think about, where to go, what inspires you. You know what to hold on to. You've got an anchor, in the cliff wall, something you can climb up when things are difficult. Tanquerey, and we come back to meditation. Look at this. This is from the spiritual life. To attain these happy results, there is nothing like meditation, accompanied by devout affections and generous resolutions. Thereby, we conceive an ideal and form deep-seated convictions that help us daily to approach that ideal. Meditation, we close our eyes, we shut out the world. So whether it's meditation or contemplation, mental prayer, the very fact of making that effort to lift up our heart and our mind to God means contact with the fire that matters, the fire of the Sacred Heart, and at the same time, it detaches us from the things below us. In the very effort of praying, we're being separated from the world. We're being purified as in a furnace, and we're being filled with ideas that are going to help us down the road. That's why I think when it comes to the takeaway points, this whole section on the purgative way, if there were two things that you did, I would say sacrifice, both in the realm of penance for past sins and mortification to be strong in the future, and prayer, but I would say particularly mental prayer. Penance, all right, and mental prayer. With that, we can go far. With the mental prayer, of course, you're going to need something to feed the mind. That's where the spiritual reading and all that comes in. Father Cranshaw talked about that some months ago. All right, so before we move on to the intellect and the will, which we're going to cover more briefly, are there any questions about the passions or about what we've said so far? No? All right, then let's look briefly at the intellect and the will. Some people will say, well, how do you mortify the intellect? What do you do with the intellect? Well, the intellect, we got to keep that under control too. Some of the ways are ignorance is a big problem. If we're ignorant about things, ignorance is the lack of a due knowledge, a knowledge we're supposed to have. If we're ignorant of certain things that we need to know for our duty of state, for example, then mortify the intellect and go do those studies because you need to know it. If you don't know, if the brain surgeon doesn't know enough about brain surgery, he's going to kill someone and he's guilty for that. So if there's something that we're supposed to know and we don't know, then we have a duty to do what's hard, to mortify ourselves and push ourselves to learn. Curiosity. Some people, it's the other end, or it can be both. In fact, so curious about some things, but ignorant about the things they need to know. Oh, I spend lots of time studying, Father. I'm always online. I'm always listening to another video, watching another series, on what? Does it have to do with your duty of state? If it does, in the right time, in the right place, it can actually be helping in the right time and right place. But if it's just, I get on the internet and I'm like a sponge, Father. I take whatever comes my way. That's irrational. Mortify that. Curiosity is a problem. We've got to mortify the intellect and make sure that we're putting first things first. We don't have time to learn everything. So learn what pertains to you first. And then if you have extra time, fine. If it's something healthy and worthwhile, you can study something else. Hastiness. Hastiness is another fault of the intellect. All right, if we don't mortify the intellect, we'll just be hasty. We don't give our judgment enough time and space. Yes, someone had a good idea, we're going to do that. Did you think it through? If you do this, yes, that good effect comes, but all these other people are put out. What? That doesn't make sense. Did you think this through? No, I guess I kind of just got excited about the idea and jumped in. Well, that's called imprudence or precipitation. That's bad judgment. Doesn't mean that we judge everything badly, but bad judgment is often where we went from A to B to D, and we skipped a step in the logic, and we didn't see that it branched off there, and actually it's going to have more effects than what we're foreseeing. So, mortifying the intellect, part of it's just saying, slow down, be deliberate, let your mind work it through. And then if yes, everything looks fine, or yes, that's worth it, there is some risk, but this is how we're going to mitigate that, and that risk is of less consequence than the good that's going to be drawn from it. So yes, I've looked at it, I've consulted maybe, that's what we're going to do. And of course, the bigger the thing, the bigger the decision, the more we have to deliberate and the more we should consult. And all along anyway, shouldn't we be asking, does God want this? Or am I just doing it because I feel like it? Pride is another problem of the intellect. Pride and obstinacy. This is one that Tanquerey really hammers. I'm just going to read what he has. Pride is to be avoided. That pride of intellect which is more dangerous and more difficult to overcome than the pride of the will. As Scupoli says, this is the pride that renders faith and obedience to superiors difficult. It's the pride of the intellect. One wants to be self-sufficient. The more confidence one has in one's own judgment, the more reluctantly does one accept the teachings of faith, or the more readily does one submit these to criticism and to personal interpretation. In like manner, one so trusts to his own wisdom that it is with repugnance that others are consulted, especially superiors. Well, I don't need to know what they have to say. I already know what I need to do. It's a lack of mortification of the intellect. It's a pride. It's an intellectual pride. Hence, regrettable mistakes occur. Hence comes also obstinacy of judgment, resulting in the final and sweeping condemnation of such opinions as differ from our own. Herein lies one of the most common causes of strife between Christian and Christian. This is what normally causes problems in parishes and all the rest, in other words, what they're saying. At times, even between Catholic writers. St. Augustine calls those who cause unfortunate dissensions destructive of peace and of the bond of charity. Quote, dividers of unity, enemies of peace, without charity, puffed up with vanity, well pleased with themselves, and great in their own eyes. So we certainly want to avoid the intellectual pride and obstinacy. Discipline and mortification of the will. All right, really, when it comes to this, we want a will, this rational appetite, we want a will that is both supple enough to obey God in all things, so flexible enough to obey God in all things. Whatever God asks, we bend and we do it. And also, at the same time, strong enough to control the body and the sensitive appetites, the passions. We want a will that's supple but firm. Supple to God, flexible to God, but strong as a rock when it comes to saying no to the unruly passions. To obtain this goal, all right, there are obstacles to be removed. The chief obstacles are lack of reflection, over-eagerness, indifference, fear of failure. Our will gets paralyzed because of a fear of failure. And then there are also some obstacles that come from outside of us, and that's human respect. What are others going to think of me? And bad example. If we're always surrounded by bad example, and we put ourselves there willingly, is it any wonder that we start to, through peer pressure or whatever, go with the flow? Well, everyone around me gets drunk Friday nights, so I get drunk Friday nights. Well, I can use that example because you're all here and it's a Friday night. So it's obviously not happening. But that's it. Surround yourself with the wrong people and the will weakens. Positive means to strengthen our will. Well, it's in the province of the mind. The will is a blind faculty. The mind needs to fill it with the right convictions and with truth so that it will actually go towards the real good. This in turn will help us to act with decision. If I know what's truly good, it's easier to act with decision, with firmness, with constancy, holding the line. And of course, in the last analysis, it must be upon God's grace that we rely. If we beg for it, if we beg for the strength of will, if we beg for this grace with humility and confidence, it will never be refused us, and with it we are invincible. That's Tanquerey. If we beg for God's grace to mortify and to have a strong will for the right things, that grace will not be refused of us, refused to us, and we, in a certain sense, become invincible because it's not our strength, it's God's that's supporting us. We must often renew, especially before important actions, our convictions regarding the absolute necessity of God's grace for us to do things well. I can do all things in Him who strengthens me, St. Paul says. So our will is, at that point, if we are leaning on God's grace, our will is strong since it shares in the very strength of God. Psalm 107, the Lord is my strength, and it is free. For true liberty consists not in yielding to the passion of the moment. That's not true freedom. Doing what I want at the moment, whenever I want. No. True freedom is in securing the triumph of reason and will over instinct and sensuality by God's grace. In this way will be accomplished the purpose we have assigned to mortification, right? To bring our senses and our lower faculties under subjection to the will, and our will under subjection to God's will. Right? That's the purpose of the mortification. Now, I was going to, and I will briefly, I'm going to just go through the last part of purification. So that's the active purification that we've talked about. Remember, we've already talked about 2 steps of the passive purification, meaning when God steps in and says, here, you've done fine, you've made some progress, you've said no to yourself. Now, this is going to hurt a little bit, but I'm going to purify you a little more. We've already done 2 levels of disillusionment, all right, from Monsignor Robert Hugh Benson's The Friendship of Christ. We'll look at just a little bit of the 3rd one, all right, all in the purgative way, and then a quick look at contemplation, which isn't so hard. It's worth looking at. All right, so there follows, however, a 3rd stage before the way of purgation is wholly passed. The soul has learned that external things are not Christ, that internal things are not Christ. She has become disillusioned first with the frame of the picture, and then next with the picture itself, because she has reached before she has reached the original. She now has to learn the last lesson of all and become disillusioned, not just with the Gregorian chant or the parish, right? And not just with the warm feelings in prayer. That was 2nd disillusionment. But now she has to become disillusioned with herself. Up till now, she has always retained a belief, however faint and humble, that there was something in herself and of herself that attracted Christ towards her. There's some reason God really loves me. There's something about me that He just really likes. About me. That others, it just kind of comes from me. She has been at least tempted to think that Christ had failed her. Now she has to learn that it is she who all along, in spite of her childlike love, has been failing Christ. This is now her third purification. And she's starting to realize all along it wasn't Christ failing me. It was me failing Christ. Even as I made progress, I was failing Christ in some regards. And this is at once the real essence and the object of purgation. She has been stripped of all her coverings, of her ornaments, of everything. Now she has to be stripped of herself, that she may be the kind of disciple that He wishes. She begins then in this 3rd stage to learn her own ignorance and her own sin, and to learn too that which ought to have been wholly incompatible with her ignorance and her sin, her amazing self-centeredness and complacency. Up to now, she has thought to possess Christ and to hold Him as her lover and a friend, to grasp Him and to keep Him. Her previous mistakes came from this very thing. Now she has to learn that not only must she relinquish all that is not Christ, but she must relinquish Christ. Leave, that is to say, her energetic hold on Him and be content instead to be altogether held and supported by Him. The soul at this point realizes that although it's a beautiful thing to love God, sanctification is worked by God loving us. It's recognizing that our weakness is supreme. And he says it's a big test. There are souls, when they go through that test, if they come through it, all right, usually they're going to be a fair bit more immune to pride. But if they don't, well, there are souls that will, precisely, they will grow prideful. In the face of their own misery, they'll say, I can't do this. I can't keep looking at my own failures. I can't see my own faults like this. It's impossible. It's useless. It very easily leads to despair. But it's, depart from me, for I am a sinful man, O Lord. They can lose everything. It's worth reading the text in full at some point on your own. All right? But if they get through that, then they are much stronger. God does it for a reason. She sees for the first time that there is no good in herself apart from Christ, that He must be all and she nothing. Here's the last paragraph of this chapter. The way of the spiritual path is strewn. So the way of the spiritual life, maybe we can see this even probably ourselves from the beginning of the year until now. Is there any point where we clocked out? I mean, numbers for attendance can die down to a certain point for different reasons. But are there souls that just stop? I can't go any further now. Maybe. I'll pray for them. And maybe we've done it. Well, pray for yourself. All right? The way of the spiritual path is strewn with the wrecks of souls that might have been friends of Christ. This one faltered because Christ put off his ornaments. This one because Christ did not allow her to think that his graces were himself. A third because wounded pride still writhed and bade her be true to her own shame rather than to his glory. All these stages and processes are known. Every spiritual writer that has ever lived has treated of them over and over again from this standpoint and from that. But the end and lesson of them all is the same. That Christ purges his friends of all that is not him. That he leaves them nothing of themselves in order that he might be wholly theirs. For no soul can learn the strength and the love of God until she has cast her whole weight upon him. All right, so that's the purgative way. Illuminative, unitive, all right, for another year. We still have a couple classes left, and in the next class, there's going to be a look at the 7 capital sins. There's going to be a look at the usual temptations of beginners. So what are the things that the devil seems to come back at it again and again, scruples and stuff like that, to try to throw the soul off? And then finally, the discernment of spirits will be the last class in introducing the illuminative way. Now, just for this last little bit when it comes to contemplation. All right, so contemplation, I'm going to follow the method of St. Ignatius in the second and third week of the retreat. It's fast, it's beautiful, all right? But it's different from meditation. And yet there's something the same. So that's why you'll recognize this from 2 classes ago. This was the chart we drew up. Luckily it hadn't been erased. All right, so the chart we drew up back then for meditation. And we chose as our topic sin. And then we said there was a beginning, a middle, and an end. And if we were doing a 15-minute meditation, you've got the times more or less plotted out. You've got a part that's always the same. There's an act and a prayer, presence of God, and a general prayer saying, please help me pray well. I can't pray on my own. And then a part that differs slightly. You have an act and a prayer. That act is painting a mental picture on topic so that your imagination doesn't just go running off. So you could say there, it's instead of saying act, or what St. Ignatius calls first prelude, and he would call this second prelude, right? But we could say instead of just act, it's a mental image, but a mental image of what? Of a place. We're doing contemplation now. Instead of meditation, we'll do contemplation, which normally then is not going to just be on sin or something. It's going to be on a scene of our Lord's life, for example, or a scene of a life of a saint. Contemplation in itself is more effective, more a matter of the heart than of the mind, although both are used. But it's a higher form of prayer. Often women find it easier from the start. It's a higher form of prayer than meditation. Men, often they'll find meditation at first because it's more of a linear thought pattern, a little easier at first, but everybody's different. And men should do contemplation too, and it's still the higher form, and women should do meditation too. We need both. All right, so contemplation, let's choose the Nativity, the feast of our Lord's birth, the birth of our Lord in Bethlehem, actually being there. Like Saint Bernard of Clairvaux, all right, there was a point when he was a little boy, 9 years old or so, he went to Matins the night before Christmas, 2 hours long or so, singing and everything else. He wanted to be with the monks, and he fell asleep. And God, rather than punishing him, gave him a sudden vision, and it was as if he was right there at the crib of Bethlehem on the day that it actually took place. From that point on, he had a taste for contemplation. He had lived it. And that's what contemplation is meant to be. You enter into the mystery as if you lived on that moment, as if it were happening right now. So instead of just painting a picture? Well, yes, we're going to do that. We're going to call that the place. We're going to still ask for grace. But now we're going to add one prelude, and that's the story, or we could say the history. So now for the parts that differ slightly from contemplation, it's not just mental image and prayer, it's a story, a place, and a grace. What happened the night of the Nativity? Remind yourself what happened, how Our Lady and St. Joseph went from Nazareth to Bethlehem, why they went, what the journey was like, what they found when they got there, how they ended up in the stable instead of in an inn, who was out in the fields tending the flocks, and who came to announce to them that Christ had been born. You just go through the story briefly in your mind. Then you imagine the place and really imagine it. Put yourself there, smell the hay, feel the damp, see the dark. You try to be there. For those who have a strong imagination, it'll be all the easier. Right? And then prayer, special grace, asking for a certain special grace, maybe the grace of humility, like Christ in the stable, or poverty, like Christ in the stable, or obedience to his Father, like Christ in the stable, or priestly love, like the heart of the little priest in the crib, who was already calling the shepherds to their God. He was already interceding for others, even before he could speak with his own mouth. He was already drawing hearts. Who sent the angels? God did. Christ, I want my friends. And the Magi come. So you can get right into the heart of Christ, but ask for some grace from him. And then, rather than point 1, point 2, point 3, it's going to be points, you could call it, but you can tell this has been up there for a week or two. It doesn't want to come off. What St. Ignatius says here is just go through it. Persons, words, actions. Who's there? Think about the people involved. You got the angels, you got Our Lady, you got our Lord, you got St. Joseph. When the shepherds first showed up, St. Joseph, what would you do if you were the father? That's what you're in the meditation now, right? What would you have said? What would you wanted to do if you're there? Jesus has just been born. You're the foster father. You're the protector. You're out in a cave in the middle of the night. There's wild animals and all the rest, and now you hear rustling outside. And now you can, it's human beings. It's a whole group of them. He's probably grabbing his rake or his staff or whatever, and he's going to stand at the door and fight to the death if he has to. But put yourself there. As if these things, I don't know what happened. I wasn't there, but it doesn't matter. You put yourself there as if you were there. Persons. You can become any one of them. But look at who's present. That one, the child in the crib is God. Words, what do they say? And focus on that. Not just even with their mouth, but what did the look of Our Lady say when she held her son for the first time? What did her look say to him, and what did his look say to her? Words. What was going on in their mind and their heart? When St. Joseph looked at his wife and his adopted son, what did he think? And then actions. And with these, you make yourself St. Joseph. You can be St. Joseph. You can be Our Lady. You can be Christ in the crib. We all want to hug Our Lady once in a while. Well, become the Christ child and you get to do it. All right, so actions. The actions as well. What did they actually do? And you go through with them. Now, when you do this, it's St. Ignatius' way of saying highlight different elements of the scene. He's not necessarily saying, okay, now you're on persons, silent film. All right, no words allowed at all. Just watch the movements. All right, or just watch they're all standing character after character. All right, that's kind of boring. I get to see just the persons. Now I get to see just the actions, but don't really pay attention to the people. All right, now it's just words. No. He's just saying, go back and around, go into that mystery and go around and around it and highlight different things. Right? And then, of course, at the end, a colloquy. So persons, words, action. It doesn't matter if it's done words, persons, actions. If it's actions, persons, words. St. Ignatius himself changes it up. You do as you want, all right? But I would say what you're doing, all right, it really, if you want an image, the difference between contemplation and meditation and contemplation, it's all just a game of golf. It's just a game of golf, all right? There's the long game and there's the short game. And you got to know both if you're going to win golf, all right? You want to get good at both of them. The long game is, well, you've got the tee box, and you know that you've got to hit the ball from there all the way over to the hole, and there's sand traps in between, and all these other obstacles, and it's 450 meters, it's 400 meters away. You're not going to be able to get that ball in that hole in one shot. You just can't do it. So you're going to have to strategize. It's a par 5. You're going to have to plan your shots. All right, that's point 1, point 2, point 3 of the meditation. All right, you're going in a linear movement. From this point to that point, yep, sin is really bad and I don't want to do it. All right, you come to the conclusion, you've got the ball in the hole. All right, that's meditation. It's the long game of golf. You're actually not in the hole yet. You're on the green. All right, so you've gotten 3 points onto the green. Great. That's meditation. Contemplation, all right, is like the short game of golf. Now this is the green. Zero in on the whole golf links, and now your ball is on the edge of the green. After 3 shots through meditation, for example, on a different day, all right, you've done some of that. Now you want to get that ball in that hole in 1 shot, right, and most in 2. If you can't get there in 1 shot, then you want to get as close as you can so you can get in there. Have you ever seen golf is fascinating. Have you ever seen a more exciting sport? Especially on TV. It's like, they stand there and it's just so intense. And then they putt and it goes into the hole and the crowd goes wild. It's fascinating. But what do they do when they get when they're on the green? They'll look at that hole from every angle. You'll see them on their hands and knees. They'll be looking at it from behind the ball. They'll be looking at it from the other side. Is there a rise? Is there a dip? I've got to get this right. If the ground is slanted, I've got to ride that slant. I've got to pace how far the ball goes, or I'm going to be off the green again. Right? So that's contemplation. You've got one goal. You've got one scene. It's not complicated. It's one thing. It's the nativity. But go around and around and around that one hole and look at it from every angle. Be St. Joseph. Be Our Lady. Be the Christ child. Be the shepherd. If you start falling asleep or you have to go get a snack, become the ox. I don't care. All right, just chewing his cud in the face of a big mystery. How many times we feel like, oh, yeah, that's me. All right, no, I think you just keep going around and around it, and you won't exhaust it. And it is so rewarding. You look and say, but I don't even know it doesn't say what happened for this detail. It doesn't say in the Bible. Great. You're free. Just don't do anything against the faith. Don't go way off track. But these people were real people. These things really happened. Mary really loved Jesus. Her kiss, her caress really meant something. And if you can join her and you can be her in a certain way for a moment, it'll change your world. That's contemplation. All right? So it's the short game of golf. All right, any questions? No? All right. Game's over. We'll say our prayer. I'll give you a blessing and you can go. Benedictio omnipotentis, Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti, descendat super vos, et manet semper. Amen.